All right, so we are now live and recording. So just really quickly, welcome back everyone for those who stayed on for the session, and welcome for those who are joining the session. This is, I believe, session 8 now of our mental health series, the Mental Health Awareness Month, hosted by the County Executive's Office here in Prince George's County. My name is Marianne Peart, and I'm the Special Advisor for the Health, Human Services, and Education portfolio, and really excited to be joined by Mr. Morgan from our team over in Social Services, and young adults who are going to be taking it away for a presentation this afternoon. And our topic is focused on youth mental health in the time of stress. So this is something, as all of us are going through this, we wanted to make sure that we amplify the voices that are not often heard. And so this session will be dedicated to our young people and getting guidance from them in this context. So if you have any questions, please post them in the chat or raise your hand. I'll be doing my best to monitor all of that. And I'm turning it over to Mr. Morgan.
Thank you so much, Carrie Ann. Good morning, everyone. Carrie Ann, thank you for having us. Again, as Carrie Ann just said, my name is Harry Morgan. I'm from the Prince George's County Department of Social Services, and I am the project supervisor for the Affirm unit. The Affirm unit is an LGBTQ specific unit that works with youth or in care who identifies LGBTQ. And we also provide staff competency training to partners and our internal staff on LGBTQ foundational 101 things. But that is not the topic of today. Today we're talking about youth mental health in the time of crisis, and I'm going to share my screen with you all. And I would like to, let's see, slideshow. One second. Can everyone see my screen? Can you see my screen, Carrie?
Yes.
So today, youth mental health in the time of crisis. This is my first time actually controlling the screen on Zoom, so bear with me, everybody. And so I want to introduce our facilitators. Again, I just said my name. I'm going to allow Nakaya and Caps to introduce themselves. Nakaya, you can start. You can unmute.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nakaya Lynch. I'm a foster youth alumni, and I'm the LGBTQ youth ambassador for PGDFS. I also work with Mr. Harry in the Affirm department, and I am an LGBTQ youth ambassador for the Human Rights Campaign, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs.
Thank you for reminding me. I forgot to share my pronouns. My pronouns are he, him, and his. Caps, you can introduce yourself.
My name is Caps Kapende. I'm originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa, and I've been in care since 2016, and I'm a junior at Norfolk State University.
Thanks so much, Caps. And unfortunately, talking about crisis and stress, one of our facilitators, Nahif Abdul, was not able to attend at the beginning. Something was going on with school, and so that kind of took precedent. So if he's able to join at the end, the panel session, he will join with us.
Okay.
Harry, real quick, I wanted to ask a question. I got your pronouns. I didn't get the other person's pronouns. It was they, and what was the other?
Oh, Caps pronouns. Caps, would you like to share your pronouns?
I didn't catch both.
Yeah, he, him, and his.
Thanks so much, Caps.
He, him, and his. And the young lady before, she said they, and what was the other one?
They, them, and theirs.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for asking.
Uh-huh.
So the goal of this presentation is to discuss the current state of the global crisis and its impact on youth and child welfare organizations, to highlight strategies to support children, youth, and their families, to provide a forum for impacted youth to discuss important mental health challenges they encounter related to their experiences, and to explore key areas to consider when working to mitigate challenges through thoughtful action. Let's put that in. Okay, good. So we want to start by giving kind of a definition of what we mean by crisis or stress, however we define that. And so the definition that we went with was that crisis is an acute disruption of the psychological homeostasis causing distress and functional impairment. It can also be one's usual coping mechanism if it's failed. Crisis can also be a stressful or situational event. a developmental event, a societal event, a cultural event, or one's perception of an event. The current crisis that everyone is talking about and experiencing right now is the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we all are in a time of crisis, and we may be doing things that we're not normally accustomed to, going to the store with a mask on, social distancing, kind of increased washing of hands, and just being aware of different activities and things that we normally may not have, that we've probably taken for granted. And so we just want to kind of let you know that that's the definition that we'll be going with when we talk about crisis. So let's see. So crisis responses. These are kind of things that we pulled together when we thought about like typical responses that you may see in youth and sometimes even in adults. When we experience a crisis, what happens? Often, sometimes we have anxiety, sometimes depression occurs, frustration, there could be suicidal ideation, aggression, some substance use, sometimes youth run away, mental illness, trouble focusing, isolation, eating too much or too little, having low or no energy, unexplained stomach aches, unexplained headaches, feelings of guilt, having difficulty readjusting, and sometimes resisting authority. Any questions about any of these? Have you all seen some of these crisis responses in response to how youth or sometimes adults actually respond when they're in crisis? I mean, I know I've experienced some of them myself, and I know I've definitely, in working with youth and child welfare, I definitely have seen some of these crisis responses. How about some of the participants? Yes, no.
Yes.
Thanks, Kat.
I've definitely experienced low energy, and the feelings of guilt sometimes come around productivity. Now we're in the house so much more, and so finding that balance between coping and still being productive in this whole new way. I personally have had feelings of guilt around, am I functioning well enough in this new state of being?
Thank you so much, Lauren. Also, when we think about these crisis responses, I often think back to myself when I was younger and living at home, and often sometimes we go to our parents and we share things with our parents or our caregivers, or even just older family members, like, oh, I'm so tired, I had a stressful day at school, or oh, like this is really bothering me, or oh, we had an argument with one of my friends. And for me as a young person, that was a crisis in itself. And often the response I was met with was, sometimes with parents, you don't know what tired is because I'm working, and this working is what makes you tired, and things like that. And so those type of responses that we probably all have received from a parent or a caregiver can ultimately sometimes shut a youth down and may limit their potential to share with you how they're feeling and what's going on. Looks like we have some questions in the chat. Oh, anxiety because of fear of unknown. Thanks, Janelle. Trouble focusing. Okay, thank you. I'm learning how to manage the chat at the same time, so thank you all. And so that definitely can be disheartening for youth to have those type of responses. And sometimes that's not the intent as caregivers, right? When we're saying, oh, I'm working hard, and school may not be that hard. And so what does that look like for the youth to have those type of statements being made, and how does their willingness to share with you and with other people?
Could I add something real quick to you, Harry?
Yeah, sure.
So in my time of doing child and adolescent and just guess youth mental health services, I find that the way adults or caregivers respond in a moment, not just for that moment, shuts down a young person, but potentially shuts them down for adulthood, right? So if they have a bad experience and they go to someone who they perceive as a trusted adult, and the response in that moment is negative, consequences from that one incident can set someone up for having poor communication structures down the road where they don't share ever again with someone. I've worked with young people in that sense too. You know, that they say to me, well, I don't want to share because the last time I shared anything with a small adult, it was met with judgment and disrespect. So I think that's also something too that, you know, sometimes in the moment, it can set someone up for a long-term hurt and pain.
Absolutely, and we talk a little bit about that more in the part where we explore how to kind of address and how to support youth when they share their crises with you. Definitely listening and validating their experiences is definitely, and not judging is definitely an important part of how you respond in order to kind of help youth resolve that crisis and work through it. And it kind of leads right into the stages of development.
Right, okay.
During each stage of development that a person experiences a psychosocial crisis, whether they have a positive or negative outcome really impacts, like you said, their personality development, their identity development, how they respond. And more specifically, I have highlighted 3 through 6. Those really, all of the stages are important, but really, those are really important stages about how we get a sense of self, a sense of identity, a sense of productivity and competency and things like that. When we look at versus guilt, we really talk about asserting control and power over the environment, a sense of purpose. And those youth who are able to successfully move through this crisis stage and this stage of development, they often develop a sense of purpose and identity and who they are. And then those youth who kind of have trouble with kind of going through that stage, they often have a heavy sense of guilt. When we talk about industry versus inferiority, that 5-year-old to 12-year-old stage, we're looking at social and academic demands, a sense of confidence, and then also if they don't successfully matriculate through that stage, we can also see that sense of inferiority. Really important to note that when you're working with youth, looking at their stage of development and seeing how if they successfully kind of went through that stage, and what does that look like? Do they have a sense of self? Do they have a sense of purpose? Do they have those assertive skills to kind of help manage that crisis? And if not, how do we support them to kind of get through those stages? So exploring strategies to support youth. So one of the strategies that I looked up was through Albert Roberts, and it's the 7 stages model of crisis intervention. And so what he proposes is just a simple 7-step crisis management intervention model that really looks at much of what we all know in human service professionals of how to address crisis in youth. And so again, 7 steps: planning and conducting crisis assessment, establishing rapport and establishing a relationship with the youth, identifying major problems, dealing with those feelings and emotions, generating and exploring alternatives, as well as developing and formulating an action plan, and then finally following up with a plan and agreement. I think one of the really important ones is number 3, identifying issues pertinent to the client and any of their issues that they have going on. We really have to really listen and focus in on what our youth are saying because often they don't feel heard. And so how can we help them resolve their stress and their crises if we are not listening to what they're saying, helping them identify the problem, helping them helping them name the emotion and the feelings that they have associated with those problems so that we can then kind of help them explore alternatives to kind of resolve through that. So Nakaya can help me with this one because we kind of came up with an acronym, ironically, about exploring strategies to help support youth in addition to the crisis management strategies. And so I think it's kind of funny, but we say that you lied to them, right? And so the LIE acronym stands for listening, looking, integrating an intersectional lens, empathizing, and empowering youth. So when we talk about listening to the youth, you really want to listen to key statements and key things that they're saying so that you can accurately assess the crisis, right? You want to listen for statements that sound like, I'm thinking about this situation even when I don't want to. I feel like this situation is really throwing me off balance. This is stressful to me or distressing me. I feel like I'm going crazy. These are really kind of key statements that you may hear, or you may hear that underlying message from youth that you want to kind of key in on and hone in on and listen and say, okay, I feel like this youth may be going through a crisis, because often we associate crisis with this huge, 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 huge event. It could be a small personal problem that has sent this youth in crisis. In child welfare, we're often in a crisis-driven mode, right? We're talking about trauma, abuse, neglect, mental health concerns, domestic violence, and these are often crisis-driven issues. And so we want to listen to what the youth are saying so that we can hone in on certain things and say, okay, this is where they are. They are in crisis. They have been impacted by this, and how to address it. You want to look for signs of that. So I kind of posed some of these questions to my social media group. And during that time, I had friends, and I never thought about this, who have 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds who are really, really young and who were impacted by COVID-19. And they were sharing me stories that how those very young youth interpreted this crisis. That, is this my fault? Or is it something that I did? Why can't I go to school? Am I being punished? And I didn't really think about it that way, for how a very, very, very young youth who may be used to having a routine, and now that routine is taken off, and how that would impact them, that learning at home, and then now being home with mom and dad more often, or whomever their caregiver may be, and how that began to manifest in the youth, and some of them having anxiety, like headaches, or not wanting to eat, or just being very fussy and frustrated. And so looking for those signs in our youth are very, very, very important. Integrating an intersectional lens. Nakai, I'd like for you to talk about that a little bit, how important it is and what that means to look at our youth from an intersectional lens.
Okay. So integrating intersectional lens is very important because youth, to quote Audre Lorde, a famous author and feminist, we do not face single issue lives, but single issue struggles. So when integrating intersectional lens, it's important because youth do not face single issue lives. They're not only foster youth, on top of that, they're most likely people of color. They have whatever, learning disabilities, ADHD, autism, mental health issues, and things that, can contribute to their stress and the ways that they perceive their life and how they cope with their lives. And then someone says they can't hear. Can you hear me better now?
Just slow down just a little bit.
Hello? Am I
Slow,
being
yeah,
heard?
we can hear you.
Okay.
Just slow down just a little bit.
Okay, sorry. So integrating intersectional lens is important because we do not face single issue lives. Youth live their lives intersectionally. They live their lives as more than just a foster youth. They are foster youth that are Black, they're foster youth that are Latino, they're foster youth that are Asian, so on and so forth. They're foster youth that are Asian, Black, and have ADHD and diagnosed depression. They're foster youth that have ADHD, diagnosed depression, and bipolar disorder. And the list just goes on and on and on. They are students. So it's important that you check in and make sure that you're tackling every area of their lives and not just them as a case, because not only does it help you to understand what they're going through and how to help them better, but it also just makes them more receptive to listening to you when you are trying to empower these youth, because you see them as more than just the foster youth. You see them as more than a case. They are a person with a life and other stressors outside of just being in foster care. And then I added empathizing because actually it's so funny. Carrie Ann brought up this point earlier. It was the exact same reason that I thought empathizing with the youth was so important, is that we tend to, when we are forced into stagnancy, we tend to feel guilty because we are not allowed to do so many things that we're used to doing. And Lauren brought up this point too, where you just kind of feel like, you feel bad because you're not doing as much. And it's you don't want youth to feel guilty that they can't go to school because, you know, we've never had a pandemic like this before. So it's hard for them to, you know, cope with the fact that they aren't able to live their regular lives. And so they tend to hold themselves to the same standard that they would hold themselves to if they were allowed to go outside, if they were allowed to go to school, if they were allowed to go to work, X, Y, and Z. So it's important to empathize with them and to help them feel as though they are valid, you know, for not being able to do the same amount of work and commit to the same amount of productivity as they would on a regular basis. So that's all I got. Mary, would you like to take it away for Empower?
Well, I wanted to kind of go back to the intersectional lens a little bit for people who may not be familiar with the term of intersectionality. And you brought up the quote by Audre Lorde. And so it really is important to acknowledge that have multiple identities. And so intersectionality is really talking about, you know, how these identities come together to possibly expose you to more discrimination or less. And so for like, you know, for the youth we have for today, you know, like Nakaya, like you said, you're an LGBTQ advocate, you're a former foster youth, you know, and so those different identities could impact your potential to be discriminated against or oppressed. And so for youth like CAPS, you know, CAPS, you have come over from the Democrat Republic of Congo. And so how that experience has impacted you coming into the United States and then attending school and then coming into a whole new environment, and how that has opened you up to the potential to be oppressed and discriminated against. And so we really want to really hone in on our youth's identities. And that way you can really examine and support them, not look at them as a single issue, because you're not just looking at a youth that's in care. You're not just looking at a youth that's in therapy. You're not just looking at a youth that's going through crisis. They have multiple identities and experiences, and all of those things come together to impact their process.
Can I add something to this? Because
yes,
the intersectional piece resonates with me like significantly. So we in the adult world, you know how this, I kind of have to, in the youth advocate space, I always find myself having to translate for adults who've forgotten that they were young people once upon a time. Mm-hmm. And so when you get to the adult world, the intersectional lens looks like wearing multiple hats, right? That's how we kind of so-called target or frame it when we transition from youth to adults. And I think it's really critical for all of us to pay attention to the fact that we are colorful beings, right? We're not just like Nakia was just saying, we're not just this one thing that you see in front of you. We are all these other layers of identity that make up my presentation in this current moment. And I find it very, very critical that we pay attention to that, especially in this space of service. I was just saying a while ago in the presentation before this, that my calling to this work is because of my desire to my field of public health and psychology, is because of my desire to serve. And recognizing that in service, there are multiple avenues to do that. There are multiple identities to do that. And so it's very critical to be in touch with ourselves as youth advocates, to recognize the multiple layers we bring to the table, and thus respect the multiple layers our young people are also bringing to the table, because both sides of the coin are very valid. We can't have a whole coin without the sides. So absolutely. Tag on that.
No, that's great, Karen. That's absolutely. And that really, really goes into the last point, which is the empowering piece. And you do that, as you stated earlier, when no judgment. Because there's a really good quote that we use in our LGBTQ trainings that if you judge them, you will lose them. And so if you judge the youth that you're working with, they will pick up on it quite quickly, whether youth is in crisis or not. And so it's really important not to judge. It's really important to listen, to look, to integrate, to empathize, and lastly, to empower. Because by empowering them, you're affirming their multiple identities, the multiple layers of who they are, getting them to entrust in you and in the process, and therefore increasing their likelihood of reaching out for resources and therefore helping resolve future crises in the future, crises in the future. Do we have any questions about any of the exploring strategies that we've had so far?
No, everything was clear.
Thanks, Kat. So I want to take a moment to kind of open up the floor, because I wanted to kind of set the stage and talk about, what mental health is, what crises looks like for youth, and then open up the floor to our youth panel, because really I want them to share what this means to the pandemic has impacted them, as well as just services that they've received, that they've been exposed to, whether it be child welfare, whether it be mental health, whether it be the school system, how human service professionals have interacted with them, what that looks like, how can we support youth through crises. So if you all have questions, we want to open up the floor so that you can enter your questions in the chat box and we can ask the panel, and then we'll just take it from there. So I'll start with the first question, and this is for Kat. I'll let you go first. How has this COVID-19 pandemic impacted you and your mental health?
I mean, it's been a little bit difficult with like dealing with being in school and coming back home for the break. We came home for spring break, which was supposed to be a week, and turned out to be the whole rest of the school year. And it gave me more time to think about my future, because when I'm in school, I'm with my friends playing video game, doing all schoolwork, kind of distract your mind from thinking about when I aged out of the system. And now that I have so much time, I'm thinking about, okay, I only have 1.5 years left before I graduate from school, and what am I going to do after that? I have to find an apartment? I have to be able to provide for myself. I have to find a job, and all that stuff kicked in.
Mhm.
And kind of I didn't have a choice but try to get a job at this moment of the pandemic. I had to go outside, find a job, be able to start saving, so I can provide for myself when I graduate, because it's not guaranteed that I'm going to get a job right after I graduate. So kind of gives you more time to reflect on things that you probably would not be thinking about too much, and it can lead you to like a little depression or feeling kind of like insulated.
And you know what, Caps, like what you're saying, I'm hearing you say that, this crisis has now took you to a place where you're starting to have to think about things that you didn't have to think about before, right? A place to live, a source of income. And it's really increased like your thoughts, like racing thoughts. And then if you're like, I don't have quick access to some of these solutions, it impacted kind of how you felt, and then impacted how you felt about yourself and your environment.
Yeah, it makes you realize that you have to take your life more serious. Like you don't have to waste time as most youth do, like go outside and have fun all the time. You have to think about like what you're gonna be doing next 5, 10 years, because you don't have that much time, and you probably don't have as much support as your friend would do after you age out. So once you age out, you by yourself, and your friend, of course, they're gonna be your friend, but they won't be there to support you at that
Mm.
particular moment. So I kind
And
of
that, go ahead, I'm sorry.
yeah, that kind of click in your head, and you kind of that can stress you, and that can also help you to be able to get where you want to go.
And it goes back to the intersectional lens that we talked about, right? Because there's some youth who experience the pandemic who have now been able to go home to their family and friends and a different type of support system. And I'm sure that you have a support system here as well, but it looks differently. Like, you said they have family and friends that can help you do this, and you're feeling that weight of that on your own because of your foster care status and, you coming from Africa. And so though immigration status. So those things impact you different, and your intersecting identities, the layers that you have experienced.
Yes.
Nakaya, how has COVID-19 impacted you?
So COVID-19 has really impacted me in a lot of ways that I wasn't even expecting. When quarantine first started hitting, I didn't think it was gonna be as serious as it ended up being. I kept telling myself that it wasn't gonna be, that real, because the state of denial. And when we were first starting to stay home, I was crawling up the walls. I was not used to having to be just sitting still for so long, and I started to feel, guilty because I wasn't being as productive, and I felt like, I'm not going outside, I'm not going to work, I'm not doing X, Y, and Z. I'm not going to the gym as much anymore. And I just became super depressed from all like the stagnance of it all. And it was really hard to maintain any sense of hope. And like on top of all of that, um, we're just not having like any signs from health professionals that things are going to clear up and things are going to get better. And we had all these different things that we were looking forward to over the summer. You know, with the Affirm unit, we were going to have a lot of things for our youth. We were going to have pride events, and I had my own personal summer plans. You know, there was just like a lot going on, and it also like it was coming to an end so abruptly. And it's like so weird because it kind of makes me empathize with my peers, and you know, it's just kind of human the way that like everybody kind of in their early 20s, we had like this fun stage where we were feeling like we were getting it together a little bit, and then you know COVID hit and everything just kind of came to a halt, and the rug was swept from under us yet again. And it's just like, you know, the tale of oldest time. Life finds a way. You think you have it all together, and then one moment will you. So there's that.
No, that's a really important point that you make. You know, sometimes we feel like we have it all together, like we're finally making some progress and that we're moving forward, that we're achieving our goals, we're stepping forward. And then all of a sudden you have that rug pulled out from under you. And going back to what we talked about in the stages of development, you know, have we moved through those stages, and are we able to address the concerns and the potential ramifications of when we go through crisis? Like, can we successfully resolve this? How do we do this? Do I have the skills necessary to pick myself back up and move forward? And so that happens to us as adults. And also, you know, I think it's important for human service professionals to recognize that that also occurs in youth, whether it could be for a test, whether it could be for a friendship, whether it could be for graduating, being in school. And so when you have that rug pulled out under you, that's a crisis, and you need support around those issues. Do we have more questions in the chat for our panel?
Let's see. What's in the chat? Oh no, they're just compliments. Thanks.
Okay, I have a question. What has self-care meant to you during this time? Okay.
Self-care is just taking time, because like I think one thing that I think our generation struggle with, is being able to sit yourself and deal with your thought. You know, we don't do that often because we have the cell phone, and we try, like when we have an issue, we try not to confront the issue. We just let it go. Might go talk to our friends on the phone and don't really ignore those issues. And just being able to sit down with our thoughts and think through those thoughts, and being able to come with a solution by ourselves can help as well. Or also talk to your friend, like get on the phone with your friend, talk about stuff as such as the future, like, oh, what do you see yourself in 5 years? What would you like to do in 10 years? Things like that can help, especially youth and care, instead of just wasting time talking about things that's not necessary.
Thanks. Nakaya, what has self-care meant for you during this time?
For me, self-care is really just meant embracing and empathizing with myself. I feel like a lot of foster youth, especially like foster youth that are like Black and women at the same time and move through the world with like being socialized as a Black woman, we tend to feel as though we have to take everything on, and we end up coming off super hard. You know, there's a stereotypical angry Black woman. You just want to take everything on and be super strong all the time. And this quarantine has really forced me to like be softer towards myself and embrace, you know, the things that I wasn't necessarily ready to confront about myself, and allow myself to slow down, and allow myself to feel sad sometimes, allow myself to feel small, and not necessarily have to automatically, you know, pick it back up, get together. You know, we got to do X, Y, and Z, give myself a little pep talk and rush on and push through my feelings like they're not there. I have to, you know, treat myself like my friend, the way I would give my friend, you know, empathy, kind of just relearning how to love and empathize with myself. It's been great, honestly. I kind of needed it, so.
Well, that's really, really good. That sounds like a really good coping skill, right? Like empathizing with myself, realizing that it's okay to make mistakes. I forgot to mention one part in the presentation where we talk about those thought traps that we all often have, right? The black and white thinking, the negative thinking that we have sometimes, like, you know, I'm not good enough, or I should have done it this way. And so those thought traps really kind of help promote us to kind of think about depression and kind of fall into those depressive, those negative emotions. emotions. And so I'm really good that you took the time to really kind of focus on yourself, empathize with yourself, see where you are, where you're feeling, kind of do a self-inventory and appreciate those moments during this time. We did get a question in the chat. Let's see. Can it come up? It says, how important has it been to stay connected to virtual and social media spaces? Has it been helpful?
A little bit, because like if we did not have like those virtual meetings, that wouldn't create more isolation for especially us. We can connect with our social workers. They can't check on us as often as they used to. And just being able to talk to people, being able to be with you guys right now kind of help us to understand that even though we're going through a crisis, people still care about us at this moment. So that kind of helped a lot.
Thanks, guys. Nakaya?
I think it's been helpful. I really appreciated having virtual spaces. Like Cass was saying, it's really important to just have that ability to be able to talk to people. And even with just people I don't know, like being on different apps and like TikTok, Instagram and Twitter, and just seeing how other people are coping with quarantine, it kind of just makes you feel less alone. And we kind of all feel a little bit even more united. Like we're all kind of going through the same thing. We're all kind of struggling right now. Oh my gosh, sorry, my dog is in the background. Peanut! Stop. We're all dealing with loud dogs during meetings. So yeah, it's been super helpful in feeling more connected to everyone else, even when we can't be around other people. Sometimes it can get a little overwhelming if you partake too much in the news or other forms of media that can be a little bit more depressing. But for the most part, it's been pretty nice.
I have a question. What are you all's thoughts on virtual therapy or teletherapy? What are your thoughts on virtual therapy right now? A lot of people have been utilizing virtual therapy as a way to get access to their therapeutic needs. What are your thoughts on that? I'll start with you, Nakaya.
I am the hugest advocate for virtual therapy. I'm just the hugest advocate for therapy in general because our generation does not believe in therapy. We like to go online and vent to our friends and overshare everywhere else, but we don't like to go and seek professional help, which is so backwards to me because that's the one person that could actually help you with anything. So I think virtual therapy is super, it's great and it's a perfect tool for our generation to utilize even without COVID because our generation already likes to go online and talk about things. And I feel like it honestly takes away that layer of vulnerability that I feel like most of our generation is scared of accepting in the first place. I think it's perfect. I love it.
Great points. Great point. Caps, what are your thoughts on virtual therapy?
I mean, exactly the same thing like I said. I think I support what the point she just gave us is clear. I don't have anything to add to that one.
I know we talked previously before that, and you had a major concern about therapy, right? You think that therapy is important, but it's also important how the people and the supporters that you have in your life introduce therapy to you, correct?
Yes, I think that therapy should not be forced to somebody. Like the youth should make a choice of what type of therapy they need. Because when I first got in the system in the foster care, I was forced to go to therapy. When for me, for the longest I've been in the U.S., soccer has been my therapy. Like when I feel like anger or depressed or anything, I just go outside, play soccer, and then come back home. Everything's fine. And being forced to go to therapy made me feel some type of way, like people think that I'm crazy. Do I show some I didn't feel comfortable doing that. If they eventually I understood that that was not going to work for me and they let me do my own thing. But if you have a youth who has he doesn't have a good coping skill at that moment, that can shut him down and would not help him to move forward. So just listening to the youth and understanding what works for him or her, that can help the department to be able to help them with the psychological issues they're going through.
And I think that's really important to note, right? We talked about not having a cookie cutter intervention for everybody. Like one thing doesn't fit for everybody. We do recognize the importance of therapy and its impact on youth and adults and how important it can be to help them go through the certain crises and stress that they have. But also it's important around messaging. How we introduce things to youth is really important. And just kind of mandating someone to go without an explanation, without explaining the benefits, without explaining the risk, can also reduce the likelihood that they actually will participate in it willingly. So we really want to think about our messaging and how we introduce things to our youth. I think we had another question in the chat. Let's see. This time has encouraged me to actually take advantage of therapy. I typically don't have time. Thank you so much, Akaya. I'm sorry, I hope I pronounced that right. It is really important to take advantage of therapy, especially when we often feel like we don't have time. You know, therapy doesn't have to be an everyday thing. It doesn't have to be an every week thing. There are some people who go to therapy once a month. There are some people who go bi-weekly. And so it really has to be important for you and fit into your schedule and how, and make it beneficial to work towards you. So make sure you're identifying a therapist that you want to work with, that you feel like can support you. You have that power to select your therapist. You don't have to just accept any therapist that comes your way. So realize what your rights and responsibilities are as a client, and how you can select, you know, who you want to provide your treatment. Do we have any more questions for our panel? Oh, we got another question. Can you all start a podcast?
Aww.
I'm sure Nakai.
It's funny that Jasmine said that, because like, y'all need to be on a podcast. I was like, podcast.
I mean, I think that especially with me and Nakai, we work together extensively, like I said, on a lot of LGBTQ issues. And so we see with our youth that are in care and our LGBTQ youth that they are a lot of times are exponentially exposed to a lot of crisis and a lot of stressors in their community, as well as homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia. And so we always are talking about empathy and listening and acknowledging and utilizing therapy, utilizing your supports, your natural supports, and your families. Utilizing your social workers and your community partners in order to create this network so that you can be successful.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So I, as you guys know, I operate in this space daily of health, human services, things of that nature. One of my questions for the panel is, how do you envision, or how would you challenge the current service framework to be better, given where we are now and the things that you've seen and the needs that you now know are critical? What would you say you can say directly to me, like if I was, you know, the system, what would you say to me to be like, you know what, this needs to be done better, or it needs to be done in this way? Tell me.
Can I go first?
Please.
Yes.
I have two issues going on, like, with the question. The first one is supporting youth with ideas, like business ideas, because, like, for me, I want to be an entrepreneur. You know, like, the department helped me with many things like sport and anything else. They will pay for it. But when it comes to like entrepreneurship, like, let's say I want to create a business and I go to them and telling them I want to write a book, they would not support me write the book. They would tell me, like, you can go online and find this website, you have to pay for it yourself. But if I tell them that I'm going to be playing sport, they're going to pay for the sport. So in my mind, it's like, of course, sport is important for me, but I also have this idea of like trying to start my own business that can help me, not just for now, but that can help me in the long run. But you guys will not support it, but you guys will support the sport that's only going to last for high school and college.
Right.
And also, like, education, like, because I came from Congo and my immigration was not like fully done, and the department had to pay for my school, like, out of pocket. I didn't get FAFSA, no scholarship, something like that. So I had to like find a way to find some financing. The department to get the department to pay for my school and my education was very difficult. Like, a month before going to school for my freshman year, I didn't even know I was going. I had to work at McDonald's trying to see if I can get $9,000 in 3 months. And at the end of the day, I made so many phone calls, and that was very stressful. And not everybody is willing to go through that challenge.
Yeah.
Some people will give up in the middle of doing it.
Yeah.
So being mindful that not every kid can benefit from the MTV, the program that pay for school education.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Not everybody's eligible for it. They were the same.
Right.
Because for me, I did not have Social Security at that moment. My immigration was very, very, very tough. So being mindful that that program is good, but it's not benefiting everybody that's in the system. And that for me is not fair because I worked my whole high school time to be able to go to school. And when I get to that point, I realize that I can't go to school because I'm different. That kind of like
Yeah.
get to my head a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Full disclosure, I completely can resonate with that too. I'm an immigrant, and I'm Jamaican, and you know how it goes, right? Education is like the thing. It's your gateway to everything. And coming to the U.S. as an immigrant was very challenging, as Caps is saying. It's a struggle. Not everything is, first of all, not everything is available to even Americans, much less coming in as an immigrant, and then having to go through the process, and you're finding out that if you do have someone to guide you through the process, that they don't even know, right? They don't even know how their system is supposed to work.
Yes.
Just layers upon layers of like people just don't know because they never had to. They never had to be curious about how to assist it themselves, much less another person. So I do like what you're saying, Caps, that there has to be a level of system and social awareness.
Yes.
That then helps us to look at somebody else's situation and say, okay, well, these gaps need to be filled in this way. So I thank you for bringing that up, because I don't think we may be mindful at the county level, but when it comes to like the larger system, the federal level, and those nuances, well, we all see what's going on there and the struggles that they have. So I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, and that's something that we need to think about navigating differently.
I guess I kind of similar on the same token that you were talking about, Carrie Ann. For Nakai and Caps, I guess this will be our final question because we're winding down. What would be some recommendations that you would have for human service professionals that are working with youth in regards to how they handle specifically the mental health of our young?
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Nakai, I see your face.
Oh, oh no.
Recommendations.
My main recommendation is literally just remembering to be intersectional. I feel like it gets swept under the rug or looked over so often. And I feel like that's one of the key pieces that's involved in not only trying to understand the youth, as I was saying, and their issues and trying to help them with their issues, but even opening the youth receptiveness up. Like a lot of my own experience and the experience with other youth that I'm friends with and have met over the years has been that they just don't feel like their worker sees them outside of just a case. So I feel like if you listen to your youth and you take in all their identities and all the things that they struggle with, and you listen to them and you pay attention to what they're going through and empathize with them and talk to them about it, and just make sure that you see them as more than just this foster youth, it'll go a long way, like just a very long way. That's my biggest recommendation. So take it away, Caps.
Take it away, Caps.
I think Nakaya just said, like I had bad social worker and I have a fantastic social worker right now, because like if you have a social worker with who you can like call at almost any moment and talk to them and they understand your point and even just listen to you like in the first place, that really goes a long way. But if you have a social worker that just, you can see that they just don't care about you at all, it doesn't help.
Great point. So it kind of sounds like you both echo what we kind of talked about in the presentation today. And so remember acronym, lie to your youth. Then look, and I forgot, integrated intersectional lens.
Yes.
And empower. So I would just like to leave you all with that. This has been my first Zoom, but a great experience. And thank you so much for Caps and Nakaya for stepping up and doing an amazing job. This is not something to do to stand in front of professionals, share your story, and also to, you know, be so vulnerable and give us recommendations. And so I want to thank you both for participating and joining on this with me and participating behind the scenes. Thank you, Carrie Ann, for inviting us. Prince George County Department of Social Services out here doing great work.
Thank you guys for listening to us.
Thank you.
Of course. Yes. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. This was, it's a little selfish of me, but this is, I love working with young people. I have a crush on young people because it always pushes me to do better. As having a long career in this space and continuing in this career space is important for me, as I have aged out many years ago, but I still tap into my young spaces. And it's critical for us to consistently engage with our young people, because things are never going to be perfect, but they can be a heck of a lot more efficient, culturally responsible, and engaging. So it's important for me in my scope of work to always push the envelope to make sure that those things are being done. And then I guess as you know, the immigrant lens, there's also that sensitivity that I have too, to that side of the cultural spectrum. So I think this was very critical to put a spin on many aspects of culture and identity, validation and affirmation. So thank you guys so much for this. If folks have, we're coming up on the time to end, but I see some messages in the space. Great job, Harry, Caps, and Nakia. Harry put his information in the chat if anybody wants to email them. This was a great presentation. Thank you all so much. Thank you all as well for staying on. If there are any other questions, you can unmute and ask before we close out and end our recording. Thank you all for this. This is awesome. You all did an outstanding job. Hooray!
Thank you so much, Carrie Ann. I really appreciate this. I'll work together in the future.
Oh yes, I will be calling you for sure for some more supports and help with this. I no longer am, as you know, in the direct service realms. It's great to have you guys as contacts to really give me keep on the pulse of things. So I will be looping back with you guys for sure. All right. Well, no question. Hold on one sec. I see another message. Continue to share, network, and speak your needs and desires. Yes.
Absolutely.
Very critical. All right. Well, this was fun. I feel really energized.
I know, right?
All right. It was a pleasure to meet all of you. And thank you for our attendees for staying on. We will definitely have more to come in this space. I think that the information shared and that idea of a podcast, Harry, you need to get on it with the team and do a podcast. So I think that's the next step, and I'll help you with that.
A podcast.
Have a podcast.
See? There we go. Oh my gosh. All right, gang. Have a great rest of your day. Be safe and take care.
All right, thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.